Hi, Senator Hough here for our weekly update. This week I want to talk about the Balanced Budget Amendment. So legislation has come in. It was introduced as a package of presented as anti-Trump, anti-federal government bills. This one really doesn't fit in there because the idea was the bill, and it's come to the Senate floor, was to get rid of all the calls for constitutional conventions that the state of Maryland has done. And so what that means is we applied in 1975, the state of Maryland passed legislation calling for a constitutional convention for the purposes of enacting a balanced budget amendment. So currently 28 states, which Maryland is included in, have called for that. If 34 call for that, Congress would then recognize that enough states have applied for it. They would have a convention to discuss that amendment, and then 38 states would have to vote to ratify whatever amendment is passed. So I thought it was worth just looking back on the fact that at the time in 1975, when we had called for a balanced budget amendment, in the resolution it states that the federal deficit was only $304 billion. I say only, still $300 billion. Of course, now we know that the deficit is over $20 trillion. So unfortunately, our efforts so far in the Senate to stop this legislation, to stop the repeal of our call for a balanced budget amendment, have been unsuccessful. And I think that's a real shame for two reasons. One, I think an Article 5 convention, which would be called by the states, was actually put into our Constitution by our founders because they wanted to have a check on the federal government, knowing that Congress would be very unlikely to limit their own powers. Therefore, they allowed the states to pass an amendment to limit the power of the federal government. I think that would be a very good thing as long as it was limited. And the Balanced Budget Amendment has broad support, and it's very much needed. 49 states have a balanced budget. The federal government does not. The federal government, of course, racks up massive deficits every year, which leads to a huge debt, which is a major problem for our country going forward. So I will continue to fight for this amendment. I think a federal balanced budget amendment is a great idea. It is the best way to constrain and limit the federal government and to limit their power and to make them act fiscally responsible, which is the best thing for our families and citizens going forward. So until next week, have a great week.